You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Adelhard and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 584, where tonight we're going to wrap up the first arc in the Battle of Jakku comic books miniseries. This is Insurgency Rising, issue number 4. And like I posted on social media tonight, really had high hopes for this series. Given the first 2 issues, kind of had some flaws. The 3rd issue, the 4th issue, it was a little rough. I'll say that. But I will say this, to keep this positive, I think it does end on a very intriguing and promising note as far as where the story is going to go. And so we'll try to focus on maybe some of the theory and some of the more compelling aspects of this one. But to help me break all that down is Jonesy. Jonesy is with us, of course. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's actually been kind of an exciting week. We got 11 seconds of new Andor, which was pretty cool.
Best 11 seconds of your life, sir.
I'm telling you, there's been a lot of 11-second moments. So it was actually really cool to get the preview for 2025 from Disney. So if you haven't seen this, go out to YouTube. It's all over the place. But it was really cool to be able to see some new scenes from Andor, and I had a bunch of other Disney content as well and Hulu content. So if your favorite series are coming out next year, you're going to want to go see the little previews. But that's pretty neat. Barreling towards Skeleton Crew. So we're only a few weeks away, if you can believe that.
Yeah, only a few weeks away, a few shows away. We've actually got our final hype show coming up. We've got to plan that somewhere between now, the December 3rd, Thanksgiving, and a number of other things. So lots more content to come. But before we get started, let's see. I know you want to say thank you to some very special folks.
Yeah, the final hype of our Patreon members. So, hey, welcome back to Jeremy, who has rejoined the This Is the Way tier. And then the guys from over at From a Certain Point of Skew, who you recently guested on their show, also signed up at the same tier, and then Ken as well. So welcome, everybody. It's been a busy week. We had 2 people sign up the night we were on air, I think Sunday. So that was really cool. And then another. So again, welcome back. Welcome to. We hope you enjoy the content. Thank you for supporting the shows. It means a lot to us. If you're curious about Patreon, ktinacast.com/Patreon, and you could be like one of these other amazing people, especially our now part of the tribe members, Alex, Raphael, Danny, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Riss, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, and Rita Reborn, and then our top tier members, the Delusion of Grandeur members. Now this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Rob. Thank you all so much. Again, ktinacast.com/YouTube or /Patreon if you want to go check that out. We just wrapped up our Star Wars A New Hope, the television series, and finger quotes there, all 6 episodes. I think you had counted up to how many hours did we end up doing?
It's just short, shy, or right around 8 hours worth of coverage on A New Hope.
It's a lot.
So you're welcome, right. World.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was really cool to be able to break it down, things that we haven't been able to talk to exclusively. So really cool. Addition to Patreon, ktinacast.com/YouTube if you'd like to come out to the live stream like these amazing people already. Staff Music Train, My Star Wars Guys, and One Up versus CPU. We see you folks in the background. Please do come out and say hello. Give us a wave. If you have comments as we're going through, if you've read the comics or if you have questions about the comics, throw them into the chat. We'll throw them up on screen and we'll try to come back to those as we can throughout the show.
Yep. And programming notes this Wednesday, or Sunday, I should say, we've got the music by John Williams. So that's the most recent documentary that's out on Disney Plus. I don't even know where to start with that. I started watching it and I'm already like teary eyed and getting emotional. And so it's going to be fun to really kind of break that down and just really talk about John Williams and his influence. I mean, the documentary does a really good job of kind of talking about that and how he came to be and just his prolific work that he's done. But it is going to be fun to kind of talk that from a Star Wars lens, through a Star Wars lens, and really talk about what that music means to us. I know we do it a lot already when we break these things down and we talk about the John Williams soundtrack, but just even now, the influence, right? All the ripple effects of his influence on other composers, up and coming composers, composers that we're now familiar with from the post Disney era. It's just a remarkable body of work. And there's going to be a lot to say. So looking forward to actually getting into and pulling down the covers on that documentary. So
Yeah,
that'll be
shout out
Sunday.
shout out to my coworker Justin, who told me that he had watched it and got me all hyped for it even more. So I'm really excited to be able to dig into that this weekend.
Yeah. All right. Well, tonight we're going to break down, of course, Insurgency Rising issue number 4. And so, Jonesy, I'm going to let you go first. Maybe give us your initial thoughts.
You sure about that?
So just to kind of retouch on the last episode, we said the third issue was kind of, there were some moments in there. I mean, the first two, like, don't get me wrong, I really felt like the first two were solid. They had a lot of great stuff in there, a lot of promising leads. It was very intriguing. I love where the story is going. The fact that they were leaning into the little video game after the Return of the Jedi. I already forgot the stinking name of it. But there was a lot of great stuff in there, and we got super excited, especially after that second one. We got the Strike Force, Jaegers in there, and a bunch of other people. And I don't know, the third issue just didn't live up to the first two, and then the fourth doesn't even live up to the third, in my opinion. But what were your thoughts on and takeaways from this one?
Oh boy, it was rough. I'm usually a comic apologist. There's a lot of things you can gather from them. You have smaller stories, you have kind of lighter content, you have things that may not really mean they're kind of side quest type things, and then you have something like this where, like we've talked about before, some of the things it struggled with, it's still struggling with. It's bouncing between, it's moving the story really fast. And I'm not saying comics or Star Wars in general should be ultra realistic, but there's some things when your characters are hurt, like severely wounded and hurt, they can't just start getting up, running around and kicking ass 5 minutes later or 5 seconds later in some cases, right? So this issue, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I didn't want to stop your flow. Go, sorry. I'll come back to it.
So this issue struggled from, with some of that stuff, some kind of cringy dialogue, to be honest with you. There were a few moments, it was pretty rough. The very first page, like, kind of set me off, though. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that I don't like being misled and kind of lied to, especially when it comes to like character death. So the very opening sequence in issue 1 that we experience with a character death and something that we didn't really mean, of course, turns out to be 100% false and completely against and just completely misleading. And I don't like that. It puts me in a sour mood. So you're getting a little bit of Moody Jonesy tonight. Apologize for that, but when you set the tone issue 4 right away in that way, it just, to me, not a great thing, right? So some of the art there were actually some cool art moments in this book. Some sequences, some of the action sequences, I think when Luke is getting kind of beat up and stuff, some of the, the dynamic and kinetic aspects of those panels are kind of cool, but the inconsistencies in the artwork is still something that is not appealing to me at the very least. So,
okay.
Some story elements, of course, we'll get into tonight, but it's difficult. It's not something I'd recommend. And the story overall, I've got a lot of concerns about where this is going for the next 4-issue arc too.
Yeah. No, I think that's all fair criticism, and I think it's constructive. I mean, there's a lot in here that again didn't really resonate with me from a story perspective. You're spot on. I mean, you could argue that, hey, in comic books, no one ever dies, and that's an absolute truth, right? In comic books, we've known that for years and years. We know that from Star Wars, no one's ever truly gone. If you want to go there, but I mean, it's like the only thing I can think of is if this character doesn't turn out to be significant and a major character, have a very major role in this overall 12-issue arc, I think I'm going to be really upset because it's such an insignificant character at the very beginning. We hear their name. We'll get into that here in a second, right? But that's about it. And so it dies. And I thought, okay, well now that's going to give the other character something to, live for and fight for. And suddenly they're reunited. And I'm like, well, okay, well, why did you kill them off? It doesn't make sense just yet. And I'm trying to keep that in perspective too. We're only 4 issues in. It's only the first arc, but when you're really looking at it from this arc itself, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And like you said, it is kind of misleading and almost kind of disqualifies some things for the comic book itself. The rest of the comic, again, there's a lot of, there's a huge amount of a suspension of disbelief that has to go into some of this stuff. And again, it is a comic. I get it, but really, like we said earlier, there's things moving so fast, and sometimes you can be forgiving of that. But when it starts to impact the story and the believability of the story, right? That's where I start getting kind of lost. I'm like, okay, we're not, I don't know what's missing here. Maybe, again, we talked about it last issue. Maybe they just needed more time, more panels, more issues, something. But there is some loss here because of how quickly the story is moving and how much we just have to just accept what's on the page and not really think too hard on it, which It's a comic book, right? We shouldn't have to think too hard on it, but some of these things are just so
because there's
glaring.
not much to really think hard about, to be honest with you. So
Yeah, but we'll get into this here now. Let's talk about so where this comic opens up here, and I just want to reemphasize the very ending. I did find intriguing, like especially when we've seen like the previews for the next arc of this, which is the Republic Under Siege. It does sound like there might be some interesting things there. So I'm still hopeful. I'm still waiting to see where this thing goes, and hopefully, we may have to really evaluate. I'm hoping that we'll evaluate this series once all 12 issues and have a different opinion, rather than just saying, okay, the first issues 3 and 4 really didn't do well, and so therefore it brings the entire series down. I don't think that could be the case, but I think there is, like you said, there is a reality. There is some slice of reality in that it could very well bring down everything else. But all right, enough of that. Let's get into the comic. So as we were alluding to earlier, we're back on Adelhard's Star Destroyer. The Strike Force had just gotten completely devastated by Brog. I mean, we talked about it. They should be dead, given how brutal of a beating they got from Commander Brog. But we open with Lieutenant Alicia waking up Preeti, who is the girl from the very first comic that died in an explosion. And, she tells her, hey, they need you. And she frees her from the cell. So apparently Adelhard has had her on this Star Destroyer the entire time. She, Lieutenant Alicia, who is, of course, the mole. She's the agent working for Leia and for Mon Mothma. And she's released her. Doesn't tell her what to do. She just says, you need to go out. Your friends need her. And so she just runs out of the cell, and we don't see her at that point. Okay. Then we go back to where Commander Brog is, and this Inquisitor, air quotes, Inquisitor. And he says, yeah, he says, they're as good as dead unless you can help them. And so and what he's saying here is, and I had to read that a few times because like, what is he really trying to say? What he's trying to say is, look, they're pretty much on death's door, and I'll leave it up to you to really just kind of put them down, right? Take your saber out, kill them. And so she agrees. She pulls out her lightsaber while they're unconscious, and she's agreeing to just go ahead and kill them all. And right before she does, you hear or we see someone off to the side say, back away from them. And of course, this is Luke Skywalker. Now, we talked about the suspension of disbelief about how he got through the iron brick barricade, how he got onto the ship without anybody being alerted and sense whatever. It's Luke Skywalker, so we'll just accept that he got on there, right? But nonetheless, he's there. And he says that blade does not belong here, pointing to the Inquisitor's blade, which I thought was funny because it does herald back to the Rise of Skywalker or the Force Awakens when Ben says that blade belongs to me. So anyways, maybe that's something he learned, Ben learned that from Luke Skywalker. I don't know. But he ignites his green saber again. And we get into the first battle here, which was the Inquisitor versus Luke Skywalker. Now, if you've ever wondered what a Luke Skywalker / Inquisitor battle would look like, this is not the battle because this is a complete dispatch of someone. And he's right. I mean, there's an imposter here. Luke calls it.
He's vadering her with only one hand.
I mean, it's not even fair. And it shouldn't be, right? It really shouldn't be. But at the same time, they were kind of misleading us to think that this was going to be an Inquisitor. In fact, I think when we saw the solicitations, right, it was sold as and a mysterious Inquisitor has shown up, and I'm like, oh my God, there's one out there, and how did they live this long? They've got to be really strong, very powerful, and none of that is true. We'll get to that here in just a little bit, but he takes them out. I don't want to spoil anything. Takes them out very quickly. Luke's able to disarm that Inquisitor, and he asks who they are. And of course, we don't get an answer just now, but they're just sitting there cowed. So anything you want to talk about as far as like the battle between them? I mean, it was, again, pretty one-sided. It was very, very quick in terms of what we saw on the panels.
Yeah, like I said, it's very much like Vader. He was teasing and toying with Luke Skywalker, just using one hand. So very much like his battle with his dad back in Empire Strikes Back, and just completely dispatches her, just is able to force push her back, calls her an imposter. You are not who you claim to be effectively. And then he's able to not dishand her necessarily, chopping the hand off or anything, but actually just lodge the blade and it clatters to the ground. So, and again, this is kind of where we have a kind of another moment too. Like he dispatches with her. She's kind of on her knees. Bragg is starting to sneak up from behind. And we get into some really cringe-worthy dialogue where Ren tells, Luke, look out. And someone, we see kind of Bragg just getting shot in the back or stunned in the back. And Ren's next dialogue is someone tagged him from behind, but who?
Yeah, it was very pulpy. Yeah, it was very.
That's the word I've been looking for. Is very
Yeah.
pulpy, and maybe that was intentional, but it was.
I mean, you would think it would have to, but it's very inconsistent with the rest of the comic. Like, we really haven't had like a moment like that where someone said, "But who?" And I mean, almost looking at the camera, expecting a response from the audience, kind of
It
thing.
happens like 3 times in this issue, which is the funny part. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's very strange, but again, and you kind of summarize it pretty well.
Yeah, and so that person that shoots Commander Bragg is, of course, Preeti, who escaped, right? We'll come back to that here in just a second. Or actually, I'm sorry, no, that's where we are right now. But so Preeti shows up, she runs over to Ren, and they kiss.
For a panel or two. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're a couple. I don't know. I kind of got the impression of that maybe from the very beginning. That first, I forget. I need to go back and read the first issue, but I did wonder at the time, like, did they have more than just a, I don't know. Did they have more? Did they have a more, I don't know, close relationship? I think it was something in their dialogue and the way they were talking in that first issue that kind of gave you that sense, but I wasn't expecting this.
I was, yeah. I got that impression pretty clearly that they were a couple.
A thing.
Yep.
Okay, and then at that point, a ton of stormtroopers show up, right? So again, they're on a Star Destroyer. A ton of stormtroopers show up, and we get this battle. So everybody, this is where I like, okay, it's a comic book, so yes. At the same time, I mean, really, they all get up. I mean, again, we just talked about they were on death's door. I mean, bleeding. One was bleeding out profusely, and it was just a matter of seconds before they just put them down totally. And yet they all bounce right back up, and they go right into a full-on fledged battle with the stormtroopers. I mean, they're pinned down and they're kind of taking cover, getting cover from boxes and crates and other stuff that just, I don't know where this stuff came from because I thought they were in a hallway, but whatever. Again, it's convenient for the story probably more than anything.
No battle damage on their faces. Like some of the scenes we saw at the end of issue 3, like where Jaeger had like a big old black eye, and none of those things carry forward. Theresa, how you pronounce her name, was slashed on the side by the Inquisitor, or quote unquote Inquisitor. She shows no ill effects of that throughout any of these, as she's kind of kicking people around. I think later on, and maybe on the ship, she's kind of clinching her side, but given the severity of her wound, especially where it was at, that would be pretty lethal, I would think.
Yeah.
At least the way that they made it seem like in issue 3, it was kind of in shadow. They didn't show you the gore, but I mean, it looked like it was pretty lethal. It could be very lethal, but it doesn't appear to be the case here, and everybody doesn't appear to really be that much worse for wear. So it's a lot of suspension of disbelief here, or of belief, I guess.
Right. Now, this entire time, Luke is preoccupied, right? He's got the Inquisitor down on their knees, and so that kind of explains why Luke doesn't just intervene and go ahead and take care of the stormtroopers, right? He's got to keep an eye on the Inquisitor that's he's just kind of taken down. And then they end up making a push, and they do take out the stormtroopers, right? So they kind of push through, knock them all out. It's not clear how many. Again, I don't know. Not a lot of forces on the Star Destroyer for whatever reason. And we go back to kind of what Luke is doing now with the Inquisitor at this point. And this is where he talks again, calls him an imposter, says they're a pretender, they're not really an Inquisitor. And at that point, the Inquisitor pulls back their hood, and it's revealed to be none other than Reyna Ascuri.
Reyna Ascuri, yeah.
And so she was the acolyte of the Beyond, right? She was the one that was sent over here to kind of recruit Adelhard over into the acolytes of the Beyond for reasons we don't know. Try to convince him that the dark side of the Force was the way to go, to embrace the dark side. Again, he resisted against that. He called the Force he said the Force was one of the reasons why Vader probably failed and Palpatine failed, too much reliance on the Force. But nonetheless, it turns out that she's the quote Inquisitor, and she really was an Inquisitor, right? I mean, it didn't feel like she ever was. I mean, I believe Luke in saying that she's an imposter. I guess one could take that as you're an imposter to the dark side or an imposter to the Sith, maybe. I don't think he was going that far, but I didn't get a sense, at least from what he says and how quickly. I mean, she doesn't really even seem like she's got that much skill with a lightsaber. I mean, she took out some people that were non-Force sensitives, but at the same time, like, it wasn't even really a battle whatsoever. So I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you think is she an Inquisitor, or was it just, did she come across masks as an Inquisitor to win his favor? Like,
yeah, no, I think it's to instill fear in other people, right? And I think with Luke, he had pointed out during the battle when he calls her an imposter, he says that, it's one thing to wield a lightsaber. It's another one to have skill with it and any kind of adeptness with it. And he's just calling her out. I think that's what he's saying. Like an actual inquisitor would have had training. They would have.
Oh, that's right. He does say that. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but he does mention you've got like no training whatsoever. He can sense that and feel it. Yeah.
Right. So she's just playing dress up, I think, to this. And I think we're also given the impression that Reyna really doesn't have much force power, I think, in general, or at least it's not in combat, right? Maybe it's in something else. But overall, like the impression we've been given throughout the 4 issues, and again, it's been really light to try to infer much of this, but it doesn't feel like the Acolytes of the Beyond really do have any kind of super strong force abilities. Nothing on the level of Luke or Vader or Palpatine, of course, but even lower level force users, even like an Inquisitor, probably would have been stronger in the Force. So that's kind of at least how we're felt. But she does seem to have some sort of insight into all of this, right? So she continues to advocate for the dark side, advocate for what Adelhard, what they believe Adelhard can become. So we're starting to get some breadcrumbs and some seeds dropped here that Adelhard has more potential than just being another Imperial blowhard, effectively, right? Or another warlord. So she's starting to drop some of these things of, saying that not even a Jedi Knight could foresee what he's going to become and where we're going and all of this and what we have set in motion, and that his preoccupation here is effectively helping enable these next steps for the Empire.
Yeah, I've got that quote, and I'll come back to it here in a second. I just want to go to the comments. One up says, "I was hoping it was the Phantom Inquisitor from Ahsoka," and I think that would have been great. Like honestly, or even if they just introduce another Inquisitor. I mean, who's to say there isn't somebody out there that's been trained and is adept and able to? I'm not going to say go toe to toe with Luke Skywalker, but at least put up a fight of some sort. And maybe that's where this comic goes to at the very end, right? We'll get to that here in just a little bit. Maybe not.
You are praying for some.
I am, man. I'm all in, man. I'm just all my chips are on this next arc here. But I do want to quickly just talk about Luke. So Luke Skywalker, he's heard of Ascuri. He calls her Adelhard's counselor and blade, which I didn't. This is where I'm like, how much time has passed? Because the way the first 2 issues read, well, like 0. Yeah, exactly. Well, the first 2 issues is like, hey, you're going out to meet Adelhard. I didn't get a sense that there had been any kind of a relationship prior to that. And yet here they are now. And then Luke's like, oh yeah, I've heard of you. You're Adelhard's, blade and counselor. And I'm thinking she's been on the ship for like 8 hours. So yeah, whatever. Okay. The other point is, I have my notes. We have a time jump that I'm not aware of. And then she's, he says, she makes a comment about her reputation, what do you call it? Preceding herself. Yeah, sorry. And I was thinking, well, like, how did she even have a relationship, or how did she have any kind of a reputation? Again, if she's only been on the ship for 8 hours or so. So maybe there's got to be a time jump in there. I don't know how you would explain that.
Go back and reread. Maybe this was captured somewhere in the Star Wars flagship comic from the past year, to where he had come across some things. Because again, in that. And I've not been a diligent reader of it consistently, except for a few of the arcs. So it's possible that he's gone through and collected some artifacts and done some research and some of those storylines that maybe he's come across Acolytes of the Beyond, and we could infer that he's come across her name, but maybe not as much about her directly in some of this. But I'm with you. It's really difficult to just grab onto this and just know, or to believe that he has any kind of knowledge as to who she is, especially any relationship with Adelhard. And we've had to, even with the rest of the rebellion or republic, whatever we want to call them here, with Leia, Mon Mothma, called her, the rest of them, like we're having to really take some leaps and bounds to, and they're working really hard. Alex Aguirre kind of worked really hard to squeeze some of those panels in just a page or two to be able to say, hey, we do have some of this knowledge and we're feeding some of this knowledge to Luke and to other operatives, but how much is it truly? And then, Luke might just be saying that he recognizes her and her affiliation with Adelhard, but I'm with you. It's pretty loose, right? It's actually very loose right now. And again, what level of detail does he have about her? It seems like very little. And I don't think there's been much of a time jump at all, because this all feels like it's happening within the matter of a handful of days so far.
Yeah.
Maybe a week or two.
Right.
And we're not talking like months or a year, right?
Right. And to be fair, like, is this really significant to the story, at least from this first 4 issues? No, it's not. So it's easy to give it a free pass, but at the same time, for us who sit here and try to like really get into this and understand it and try to make sense of what, why things are happening and what those things, where this stuff could lead, it does kind of throw you off and it really kind of makes you scratch your head. I just want to end this. Let me just kind of quote Arena here when she's talking to Luke. She says, Adelhard is doing the unthinkable. He is rebuilding, creating a new empire, a power that will fill the void left by the likes of Vader and Palpatine, and no one, not even a Jedi Knight, can stop him. Now, of course, this is just monologuing, and she's trying to, instill fear and all of that. I don't know that Luke really buys any of that, honestly, and I think he says as much a little bit later. I don't know if we have it in our notes or not, but I mean, he pretty much is like, yeah, whatever, dude. You're not a threat at all, and neither is Adelhard as far as he's concerned. Well,
is that consistent with what Reyna and you, Tashu, were talking about at the beginning of the series? I mean, because they've had to kind of they've had to recruit him kind of hard because he was going off on a tangent and he was a bit of a wild card.
Yeah,
so I think they wanted him, but to put all of their eggs in, she seems to be all in all of a sudden, and I think that was probably the directive they were going. But did it really land, like this monologue? Did it really land with what we've seen in the previous issues?
No, probably not. But what I will say is, again, I know I keep going back to it, but the very ending, if Adelhard really is just a pawn for the acolytes of the beyond, and they've had some kind of vision where if they've seen what he will become, then she could be talking to that. It could be why they're so insistent on bringing this guy on board. It's to fulfill their own needs. I mean, they really don't want anything to do with Adelhard, right? Is the purists would be following Operation Cinder, and I think that's what Yoop is probably trying to do. But at the same time, if he's got this person here that he can take advantage of, manipulate, become a dark side user, or I don't know. We'll speculate on what this is going, where this is going. But I think that's probably the angle that they're coming from here. So they've had some vision and they're like, oh yeah, man, this is going to go our way and things are going to be really horrible for them. So, all right. We go to Chandrilla, and this is where Leia is decided to call up Lando. Again, there's going to be a lot of suspension of disbelief here, and we're just going to have to take a lot of the stuff at face value. But she calls up Lando because she needs Lando to help out, essentially. And Lando immediately is like, oh yeah, you're talking about the stranded forces in the Anuet sector. Like, okay, he already knew that. Then he says, he talks about knowing that Adelhard had hired some Kijimi forces. Again, we've only been it's only been a few days as far as the timeline goes, but he's already known about the Kijimi forces. Now that one I can be like, okay, he's got connections to the underground and stuff. All right, that one's not too hard. I'll give him that one. But on top of that, he also knows that the acolytes of the beyond are involved with the Anuet sector as well, and Adelhard specifically. And that's where I was like, okay, hold on. Like, I love Lando. He's freaking amazing. One of my favorite characters, a total badass in Shadow of the Sith in every possible way, even in the Battlefront games. But then I started like, wow, come on. How does he know about all of this information? Some of that might just be to not have to really kind of bring him up to speed on this and just not waste time on the comic book panels. They may have just done that and said, oh yeah, he's Lando. He knows everything. But it just felt like, wow, Lando's in on all of this stuff. Again, really not the point of where the story is. This was really, this whole little section here is really just to say, look, Leia and the New Republic are spread thin. I know you're going to poke holes in that in just a little bit, but they're spread thin. They need help. He suspects that Luke is gone too. Like, no one knows where Luke is at. No one knows where these forces are in the Anuet system. And so he's like, yeah, I'll heed the call. I will go out there and do what you need me to do. I'll rescue our friends once again. So.
Consider our friends saved once again.
That's a quote. To quote it, yeah.
That's a quote.
Again, more sappy, campy stuff, but
Lando does have a really super awesome yacht. I mean, this thing is like a battle barge. It's pretty cool. It's literally like a space yacht. This actually fits Lando really well. I like this ship design. It's very luxury, but also it has like a gun in the front, like a turret. And I wish we kind of show it to you, but if you were to imagine like what Lando would be flying in the stage, like in more of this yacht, like luxury oriented, clearly success has followed him maybe a little bit with his fame right now and maybe some money.
Yeah.
This is along the lines of what you would expect him to be flying. And the design of this actually fits him pretty perfectly.
Yeah, no, you're right on that. So one point there, but all right, we go back to the Anuet system now. So Lando's on his way. And this is where Luke tells Ren and the rest of the strike force that, look, they got to get out of there. Take Reyna, Ascore, he's going to go after Adelhard, but they need to get away. And of course, Rin is pushing back. She's like, no, I can't leave you, that kind of thing. And he's like, no, trust me, you need to go. And I think it's, who was it? Was it Cass Dameron who was like, look, he's a big boy. He can totally take care of himself. We don't need to sit here and worry about Luke Skywalker. Let's get out of Dodge right now and take Reyna with us. And so, so at that point, Reyna starts monologuing yet again. She tells Luke that Adelhard is waiting for him on the ship, and she says that she has foreseen this as an event that is the precursor to his, quote, greatest victory. So again, this is the second time now where they've alluded to, hey, there's something bigger that's going to happen, something really important, and Adelhard is going to be a part of it. And so I think that's where a lot of this confidence in Bostring is coming from, as far as Reyna is concerned. So Luke rushes off. He runs out there. He finds Adelhard. They're kind of in a round room with I don't know, it's kind of like a bridge. I'm going to call it a bridge, but it only falls like maybe 5-10 feet down. It's not really far. But they meet up and we move back over to the strike force. They run into more stormtroopers, more resistance, if you will. They're pushing up against those. Again, Rin's not wanting to leave Luke Skywalker. And at this point, there's suddenly a huge explosion that they feel. And we'll come to find out this is now Lando who's shown up, and he's shown up with a force, a contingent of New Republic ships to try to take out this Star Destroyer. I have questions about what they were really trying to do. Like, I don't know. I mean, if you had a Star Destroyer and all the people were on the inside, they weren't there. I don't know that bombing that thing, though, at this as massive and as hard as they did, would be the right thing to do, unless they really felt like, okay, we're going to put a dent in the Star Destroyer. But I mean, given what happens after they hit it, I mean, it's significant enough. So I don't know. We don't know it's Lando at this point as a reader, but we can suspect that it is. Yeah,
we just know the ship is getting hit and it's getting rocked. So it's kind of throwing our heroes around a little bit too, and making things a little unsteady.
Yep. Okay. We go back to Luke and Adelhard, and right when you think they're about to kind of get into it, there is a contingent of stormtroopers that Adelhard has that kind of step in between them. And we get Luke Skywalker fighting like 10 stormtroopers, which, it's not much of a battle again, right? He's force pushing them left and right. I mean, they're flopping over each other. He's blocking bolts. I mean, everything you would expect Luke Skywalker to do fighting stormtroopers of all things. This is pretty much the battle, but it's a distraction, and it's at least something to kind of preoccupy him while Adelhard sits there and contemplates his next move. Once he does do all that, Luke he then moves in like really close to Adelhard as though he's about to, confront him. And then they're rocked by another huge explosion. And this explosion's so big that it knocks Luke over. It almost knocks Adelhard over, but it knocks Luke's lightsaber out of his hand. I don't know. Convenient. All right, fine, whatever. He drops his lightsaber. And this is where Adelhard runs up to him and just starts like relentlessly kicking him in the stomach and the chest or whatever while he's on the ground. He's just kicking Luke Skywalker over and over again.
While monologuing. It's pretty impressive.
While monologuing. And Luke doesn't use the force to force push him away, which I was like, why doesn't he just push this dude away? Like, whatever. And then while that's all going on and while that's monologuing, he's completely distracted, and Luke is able to take the lightsaber and basically cut a portion of this walkway, both behind and in front of him. I know. It's just like, okay, whatever. But anyways, he does that because he had to have a way for Adelhard to fall down, and so that Luke Skywalker could get away. This is where I have like questions about like, why did they just leave? Like, why would Luke Skywalker just leave this guy, right? When, maybe he thought the Star Destroyer was going to blow up or whatever. But either way, Adelhard falls down. Luke Skywalker runs off, and I don't know. Give me your thoughts, I guess, on that battle before we get into the final piece of this.
Yeah, and to go on your point with why did he leave him? I mean, so a couple of pages before this is what Luke says: "I need to find him. I need to stop him. Adelhard has gone too far, and he has to face the consequences of his own making." Is that what it says? Yeah, of his own making.
Up to that, yeah, something like that. But
so it's. Luke is actually like speaking very definitively in this way, right? Like he's actually going to bring him to justice, maybe capture him like they did with Reyna, not just cut the bridge out from under him and then escape. So it's a little bit inconsistent. I will say this though, the art on these pages, the way that Adelhard is drawn in some of these is actually quite good.
Yeah, it's pretty
And
menacing the way he looks.
a lot of the action sequences here, and I think in these panels with the Luke Adelhard battle are actually quite good. I think these are probably the best pages in the entire book, and these are I like these quite a bit. But yeah, it's a lot of convenience, right? Luke kind of getting beat up on. I mean, like you said, Superman effect. You got to do something to beat up Luke. So knocking him off his feet, losing his weapon, things like that are ways you can kind of do that. But Luke never loses control of the situation. He's in control. He's absorbing the blocks with his, or he's kind of blocking some of it with his arm and his hand. So taking a little bit of damage. He's got a little bit of bruising on his face, I guess, but never losing control, never giving in to any kind of hate or dark side, and just disables it. But why disable the bridge? Let him crash down below and then leave? Does he think the ship is going to explode and not survive? I mean, maybe that's what he had thought, but then why confront him in the first place? I think type of thing. So it just kind of makes you wonder why we needed this battle, except to kind of further Adelhard's character here.
And that's what this whole, like, I don't want to steal my big talking point at the very end of all of this, but that's what this 4 issues is really all about. It's all about Adelhard, and it's all about setting him on a path to become something else. And that's why he had to live. That's why Luke Skywalker didn't take him with him, because it completely would train wreck that whole storyline. But more on that here in just a few. All right, we go back over to, let's just wrap this up. So we go back over to the bay, where now Ren and the Strike Force are trying to get out of there. They're running off to a ship, which looks like the freaking Ghost. I thought it was the Ghost when I saw it. I'm like, oh my God, they're jumping into the Ghost,
Yeah,
but here is here.
Yeah, some of the background shots without the detail definitely have some design elements there. But
it's like almost like a model of the Ghost ship.
But when you see the later scene, it's very rectangular and very long compared to kind of big and bulky like the Ghost.
And of course they're sitting there fighting and and waiting. And Ren is still, Ren is still waiting for Luke Skywalker. She's very concerned about it. And this all plays into like he was they basically saved her, and they were very nice to her, and he gave her all those thoughts of hope, and so he's had an impact on her life. And there's a good point. I don't remember who it was. It might have been Cass or someone says, well, look, even Jedi need a way off the ship, right? If this ship's going to blow up, you can't just leave a Jedi in here. He has no way to escape. And so eventually Luke does show up. He's fighting his way through stormtroopers. He gets onto the ship. Lando chimes in saying, hey, y'all, you guys need to thank me for this, credit me later kind of thing. And then Luke says, as they're kind of flying away, he's talking about Adelhard and his confrontation with Adelhard, and says, but I caught a glimpse of who he is, who he wants to be, a man driven by a burning desire to seize something he feels was promised to him, but was yanked away. I thought that was actually a good way to kind of wrap that piece up, because I don't think we really touched on that or hit on that. But if you think about it from that perspective, yeah, he was next in line. He was, again, a student pupil of Palpatine and Thrawn and Tarkin and all these other horrible people. And at the same time, he was living this life where, like, hey, it's only a matter of time before I'm now the next Thrawn, or I'm now the Grand Admiral. And of course, he put himself into that position, but he didn't really earn it. It wasn't really bestowed upon him the way he wanted to, the way he had been working towards. And suddenly, now that the Empire is gone, he's never going to have that opportunity. He's never going to have Palpatine come say, "Hey, you're the next big dog," or Vader come say, "We've seen the great work that you're doing, and we want to promote you, right? Give you a promotion," kind of thing. That has been pulled away from him. So from that perspective, I do like that. I hadn't really considered that angle, that he was robbed of this, and so he's kind of he's taking matters in his own hand, making his own destiny in that way.
We see a much more emotional Adelhard here, like you were saying, kind of giving into that aspect of it. Before, it was very cold and calculated, very much trying to be rigid. It was almost a bit delusional in some ways, of not wanting to admit that the Empire's defeat. And if he just ignores it long enough, and this was from issues 1 and maybe 2, he just ignores it, he can set a new path for the Empire, at least in this sector. And this sector still belongs to the Empire. And this is kind of is borrowing some themes a little bit from the Imperial Remnant, from Legends, and from the old expanded universe. Some themes kind of in that same realm, but you definitely start to see the ambition on the last page here, as he starts to talk about, he's a survivor. He, maybe it's time for him to finally embrace this darkness, right? There's some of these breadcrumbs they keep leaving for us, that maybe he's force sensitive, or maybe he has the capacity to be in the same mold as maybe as a Vader, or again, not to say Palpatine, but at least in that path. So maybe this is why there's an Acolytes of the Beyond interest in him in that, and we definitely given a lot of suggestions that might be the case, but they've all been fairly light until this point where he actually says, maybe I should do this, stop fighting this, stop trying to be the non-wizard, and to embrace some of these magics and things like that he continues to want to push against. So this is probably the most interesting aspect of it. These are actually really cool, like really well-drawn scenes too, like a lot of great shadows, some embers flying around him. So a lot of menacing type of darkness and stuff like that. So great use of pencils and dark and shadow here. And so again, good stuff. But again, the Star Destroyer took such a beating, and then they just all kind of leave. So it's clearly just an escape type of mission, just kind of blow cover, and then everybody bugs out. But we get a little bit of dialogue though on the ship though, that Lando says, yeah, you're welcome. Thank me later. But hey, good luck with the Spice Runners of Kijimi, because you still got to get through with them. You got a whole fleet with you, Lando. Why not finish the job, dude? So
yeah.
It's a little confusing if he's just bailing on some of this stuff. I don't know, but where Adelhard's concerned though, and literally this is kind of where the issue ends, and it'll continue with Republic Under Siege #1 here later this month. But yeah, it's back to him and his ambition and trying to maybe embrace something else that we've only been given very, very small glimpses of to date so far.
Let me just read this. I have the quote here. He's talking to Luke Skywalker. He's talking to himself, really, but he says, I learned from my mistakes, boy. I'm a survivor, and the power you wield, the mysticism and magic I once wrote off as parlor tricks, perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps it's time I embrace a bit of darkness myself. And so where my mind goes is, okay, so he's going to give in to Reyna and the Acolytes of the Beyond. I mean, how he gets back in contact with them, I don't know, because Reyna is now a prisoner, so we'll see where that goes, right? But I suspect he's going to go back to Yoop and the Acolytes of the Beyond and say, do with me, I'm your vessel, right? Do with me what you will, what you need to. I want to become the next Vader, and I'm, Vader with a small V. And my guess is they're likely going to either give him like a Sith artifact, because he's not Force sensitive, right? So something's got to be, they've got to figure out a way to, or unless maybe he is Force sensitive. I don't know. I don't want to make that assumption, but I assume he's not, at least right now. We have no reason to believe he is. And so it's going to be something like an artifact, some kind of cursed weapon or a mask or something that's a Sith artifact that's going to allow him to suddenly have powers that, are going to give Luke a challenge. And I think that's probably where this is going, right? He's going to have to give into that dark side, not just spiritually, but physically as well, because I don't see how he's going to be able to do this. And I think that plays into what we were talking about earlier, where they've had this vision that he is going to become the next champion of the dark side and kind of be their herald and all kinds of stuff there. So that could be one way they do this. And really this all plays into what I said earlier. This arc was about giving us who Adelhard was. Remember, we had his backstory, and we got to see kind of where he was at the end of the fall of the Empire. And now he's on this new journey, a transformation, almost a literal, I suspect it's going to be a literal transformation of him going and embracing the dark side and becoming, again, some dark side figure that's going to go toe to toe with Luke Skywalker at some point.
He's going to become Snoke.
Maybe this is the Snoke origin that we're getting here. I don't know, but that's I find that intriguing. Like, I do like that aspect of it. I like I don't like how we got here all the way in the last two issues, but I do like that there is something promising and intriguing going into this next arc, which, by the way, is Republic Under Siege, and that first issue drops on November 20th. So, what is that? A week from today, as a matter of fact.
Yep, we're getting more.
Yeah, we're getting more.
Yeah, no, I agree with you to an extent of, like, I think where we got with Adelhard in the last few pages of this one are more encouraging about it. Definitely how we got here was not ideal, I think, and kind of clunky, or actually quite clunky the way we got here, but maybe they've set up enough in the next part of the story, now that we've got this out of the way, of trying to set up all of it. We talked about this last week too, setting up all of these different elements from the Republic side of things with the Luke Skywalker aspect, Acolytes of the Beyond, the Empire, the Adelhard's Empire versus the Operation Cinder Empire, and how are they all working together or against each other or in concert and in coordination. All of that stuff we had to kind of throw into the mix. But we threw a lot of noise in between all of that too, which I think probably really hurt the story overall, because unless these characters really stick around, which I presume they will, like Jarek Yeager and Therese or Teresa or whatever her name might be.
Yeah, Teresa.
Yeah, so some of these other characters, Preeti and Ren, maybe they're all going to stick around. The strike force becomes this thing, but we were talking about this in Discord too, that this series just kind of teases you enough of like, we really just want a Luke Skywalker story, and hopefully this isn't the Luke Skywalker story we think we've been wanting, because we're not off on the right foot if it's more of a Luke Skywalker story. I don't think it will be a Luke Skywalker story necessarily, like a focused one, but the way that he works in and out of all of this, we'll have to see how we kind of feel about that, if it lends itself to better or more material for Luke, or if it means something else.
Yeah, I suspect it will be. Like, I mean, that would be a really big misstep if they don't. You can't give somebody this dialogue at the very end of a comic book and then not make it about Luke. Like, it doesn't add up, right? Yeah. I think so. I think that will be there. I think though that we are probably going to we'll probably see more of Leia. What's the other guy's name? Calder. Yep. We'll get more from them. We'll get more from Mon Mothma. You know, maybe it's going to be, you know, there's the Bib Fortuna piece that we talked about where he just kind of suddenly popped up. So I think we'll probably get that kind of, you know, all the government galactic relationship stuff that's brewing in the background on top of what's going on here with Luke.
Yes. Star Wars politics. Here we go.
Star Wars politics.
Let's get back into it.
And then, you know, there's also a question of like, what are Chewie and Han doing? You know, They took off. We saw them in the first issue. I don't see how you tell the Battle of Jakku and everything else that's happening right now without revisiting them. And so maybe they pop up in the second arc, maybe in the third arc. But yeah,
does that just add more calamity?
It could very well do that as well. So I don't know. Again, we'll see. I think, again, it's probably fair to judge this series as a whole once all 12 issues are out. But at least for this arc, I don't know. The first two were strong. Last two were not. But at least I feel like we're off on a better foot going into the next arc. So
we shall see, my friend.
Yeah. That's a very Snoke quote for you to say. Thank you for doing that. Yep. We shall see. All right. Hey, thanks to everybody joining in the live chat. I know you were taking roll call.
Yeah, groups of people that don't disappoint, the people on our live stream. Steph, Music Train, My Star Wars Guys, One Up versus CPU. One Up versus CPUs thinks that Luke should get his own series as well. There are a lot of people with you on that, my friend. I think there's some folks that would really enjoy a Luke Skywalker series. Especially, I think if we were to kind of theorize about a Luke series would look like, I think I would want it probably a few years after where we're at right now. That picks up where he is truly kind of disconnecting a little bit from the Republic. And set him on that path, more of that Ben type of story like we've had some teases of in the past, right? So I think something like that would be more interesting than I think maybe this time frame right now, that would be kind of fun to be able to do.
Yeah, and we've got the Legacy of Vader series coming out, but that seems more Kylo Ren centric, Ben Solo centric. But you know, I'm sure he'll pop up. He has to pop up in that series at some point.
Yeah, I mean, their stories are intertwined, so it makes sense to do all of that, right? So, and you can do that. You can bring Luke in and out without giving him the specific series, but are we bold enough to go that route too? Because it's going to get a lot of scrutiny, right? And what's the story you want to tell? And there's a lot of stories to tell is kind of the problem. But but again, we'll see where this goes. We'll see where this series takes us and where they take our main characters. And does this continue to feel like an extension of the Skywalker saga? And continue that path, or does it kind of like what you were alluding? Is it starting to steer us into something that feels a little bit different than like what we went to with the expanded universe? I'm not saying storyline wise, but just kind of the feel where it just felt like a continuation rather than starting to deviate from it entirely.
Yeah. And before we get out of here, I also want to say thank you to the good folks at Marvel for sending us the previews of these comic books and all the other stuff they send us to preview. Super generous. We're very thankful and looking forward to the next arc as well.
And clearly they don't tell us what to say. All of our opinions are our own. So
yeah, we're not paid to say that. They wouldn't pay us for that. All right, let's see. Again, just a reminder, Sunday we'll be back for the music by John Williams. Was that a Patreon show? I forget now.
We're going to do Patreon for that.
Okay, so Patreon only. So Patreon members, you got that coming to you exclusively. But that'll be Sunday night for this week. And then we'll see what next week. Maybe we'll get into the new arc. We'll see. We may have to move that show to a Thursday, by the way, letting you know right here on the air now.
Well, next week we're probably going to have to start doing Skeleton Crews. We've got Thanksgiving coming up the week after that. So
yeah, we'll work it in at some point.
Good times. Yeah.
Let's see what else we got. Anything else before? Hey, no, we forgot to plug. Lauren has got a new video out for Jedi Novel Archive.
Right.
Yeah. So I forget what the name of the book was now that she did.
I'll pull it up on air.
Yeah.
I saw it this morning, and I totally, because it caught me off guard. I forgot she was doing it.
It caught me off guard too. It caught a lot of people off guard. Everybody's like, "Whoa!" I think Dale chimed in at one point. Is like,
"Yeah, Beware the Nameless." Yeah, people have been asking for this for a while. If we were going to cover it, if Lauren was going to cover it, and of course the answer is always yes. So yeah, Beware the Nameless. She's got a video out there on the YouTube channel, cantinacast.com/YouTube, and it is already doing really well. Got a couple comments out there, so be sure to leave us a comment on what you think about that book and that review.
Yeah,
Lauren on top of things as usual.
Yes, and I need to. Lauren will be back with. We're going to do the High Republic adventures. We didn't get a chance to wrap that up from Phase 3, so we've got a couple more, at least one more show coming up here. Hopefully soon. It's just been a timing thing more than anything else. So she'll be back with me to kind of break those down as well. Okay, enough of all that. Any final comments? Anything else before we get out of here?
No, thanks everyone.
All right, guys. We'll see you all on Sunday.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.